Erica? Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on to additional items to be placed on the agenda. Does anyone have anything this evening that they'd like to recommend for the agenda? No changes? All right, we'll go on to open forum. Anyone this evening who wishes to address the board? No? Then we'll move on to the consent agenda, which this evening consists of approving the regular meeting minutes of October 17th, 2012, approving the special meeting minutes of October 23rd, 2012, approving the closed session meeting minutes of October 23rd, 2012, approving payment of October payroll and November warrants, approve board resolution for serious safety hazard approval, and approve finance section 4 board policies. Bill checker was myself this past month, and there were some minor items in the bills that I spoke with Catherine about. I think there's just two I'll bring to the board's attention just because of the dollar amount. One had to do with the purchasing of pre-algebra textbooks, which was item number 21, and it's my understanding that these aren't new textbooks in the sense that they are different than what we've already had. They are additional textbooks, and we will be using those to expand the student population, basically, who is using the pre-algebra textbook. And then the other item was on our MasterCard, and that had to do with the $3,000 charge for the coach buses. And Catherine had indicated that this was actually an item that we paid by check. They held our credit card as collateral, so to say, and even though we paid by check, we still were charged on the credit card, so at this point we have stopped payment. Is that correct?
Well, I called the credit card company, so they put that payment on hold. They're going to get a credit back.
Okay. So we should see that in a future bill?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything on the bills?
I had a couple. So the Promethean training on number 2, is that from last month? Didn't we have Promethean training?
I had asked Catherine that same thing, and she had said following the original training, there was some additional training that our staff members had requested. So they actually secured additional training dates, and this was after.
This was for the current bill is for October 1st and 2nd. Last month's bill was for August for the institute.
And these were after-school training, right?
Yes.
So this was additional training that teachers had requested. Is that my understanding, right, Catherine?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I know we had just done it.
I had asked that same question.
All right, and I have, I think, on number 29, it says ITBS reports, data, and reports. What's the difference between reports, data, and reports?
One is electronic data, the other one is paper data. This one paper, the other one is electronic.
Is it the same report?
It's the ITBS. One is for the students' reports, you know, what the narrative profiles that the students get and the teachers.
The one that they got in the mail?
Yes.
And then the other one is like on a CD?
The one that, yes.
I think that was it.
Anyone else on any of the bills or anything on the consent agenda, please?
Okay.
Yeah, on the minutes for the Board of Ed, the special meeting, the time is incorrect, I believe, under action number 18. We moved into closed session, I believe that should be 7:03 p.m. instead of 6:03, right?
You're right. You're right.
I have a question. Did we pay the full attorney fee for that meeting? Did we?
I'm sorry.
Do you know what I mean, like for the attorney?
We'd have to check with Catherine.
Oh, okay.
I don't, it's not like I have an answer.
Oh, that's fine.
So. Anything else on that one? Anything else on the consent agenda? All right, may I have a motion then, please, that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda as revised?
I motion.
May I have a second, please?
Second.
Did you get, it was moved by Lisa, seconded by Rick. It has been moved and seconded that the Board of Education approves the consent agenda as revised. Roll call?
Mrs. Hauk?
Yes.
Mr. Mobley?
Yes.
Mrs. Nelson?
No.
Mrs. O'Halloran?
Yes.
Mr. Wrigley?
Yes.
Mrs. Tegmark?
Yes.
Mrs. Silver?
Yes, ayes have it, and the motion carries. We'll move on then to reports and discussion items. The superintendent's report,
Yes.
beginning with our tax objections, Mark.
Thank you. First item, there's actually two items. This has to do with some tax rate objections and the settlement that's being proposed by our legal counsel. And the second thing is an update on the UPS property tax litigation that the board has been involved with for some time now, along with District 204 and the Fire Protection District. Originally, Aris Dalianis was going to be here to update the board on these items, but he had a conflict, and Scott Metcalf is with us this evening, and he works side by side with Aris on both of these issues, and actually was more directly involved in the first item, the proposed tax settlement. So let me ask this, Scott. I know you gave us the one letter, and that's in the board packet. The board has read that, but there's actually more background information on how this came about, that it's not a Pleasantdale specific tax objection. So I think that if you could provide some of that background, and then also that the history that we have actually approved this same level of settlement, I think, for mills in the past, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I am Scott Metcalf, and thank you for letting me come here tonight and talk to you about this. By way of background, tax rate objections have about a 150-year history of court decisions in Illinois. There is a long line of cases dealing with these, and every year they're filed against virtually every taxing agency in Cook County, DuPage County, Kane County, all across Illinois. They are filed primarily by large property owners. Technically, anyone can file a rate objection, but it's really only pursued by those large property owners who have paid substantial amounts of property taxes and are seeking to get some of that back somehow. They are filed generally by their own legal counsel, so the property owner's attorney for other tax purposes files what could be considered a generic objection to the property tax levy of the taxing agencies that have taxing authority over that particular property. But then there is a procedure in Cook County whereby a lead objector's counsel is appointed. So there's one attorney who takes charge of everyone's cases and then appears in court on behalf of all of the objectors and works out settlements or tries all of the cases himself. And the other attorneys essentially take a back seat. This particular attorney, who has been appointed for all of the suburban taxing agencies to be lead counsel for the rate objectors, spends hours and hours poring over all of the information in the Cook County Clerk's office regarding levies. He also spends a tremendous amount of time analyzing the annual financial reports of just about every taxing agency in Cook County. And he develops a series of objections that people who have filed generic objections then claim as their own more specific objections. And so his objections really become what is the meat of the litigation. The cost effectiveness of litigating these cases is not great. I will give you an example. There have been objections filed to working cash fund transfers against 17 DuPage County school districts. And these have been filed over the course of the past 14 years. The first one was filed in 1998, and they are still being litigated. So that's just a way of saying that if you go down the path of litigation with some of these cases, it can become less cost effective than settling these cases. And that's what we were recommending in this particular case, was that because the initial settlement demand made by the rate objector's lead counsel was less than what we would anticipate it would cost to further pursue these on behalf of the district, that we recommended a settlement of 4 mills. The 2001 through 2004 rate objections were also settled at 4 mills per year. And a mill, for purposes of rate objections, is 1/100,000th of the equalized assessed value of the taxing agency. And so that works out to be approximately $6,500 and $6,300 for 2005 and 2006. And we were recommending that as a proposed way of getting out of the litigation in the most cost-effective manner for the district.
So board, have any questions?
So if we settle, basically that's it, so that the objectors they're at the end of the road.
It's the litigation for 2005 and 2006 is over.
Right.
But remember, these are filed against every taxing agency every year. So 2007 and 2008
No, right.
will come up in the future.
But specifically for these two exposures, so essentially we have an exposure, if I read this correctly, of like $281,000, and they're offering to settle it for 12.
About 5%.
Okay. And that's, there's no opportunity for them to come back and say, well, you know, we changed our mind or what have you. It's done. Well, 5 and 06 are in the books.
That's correct.
Jamie, do you know how much we've spent, you said the cost effectiveness is not great, how much we've spent on this since, was it filed like in 2006, I'm guessing? Or does it get filed later? Like when do you file, like when do these get filed?
They have to be filed within 165 days of the first penalty date of the second installment of the property taxes, which for these years would probably be approximately May of 2006 and May of 2007. They are then held inactive by the circuit court until the prior years have settled, and they generally activate 2 years at a time. So nothing happened on the 2005 and 6 cases until last year.
So I mean, have we spent more trying to recoup 12,000 or do we know?
I don't know, do we know those figures?
Scott, in terms of, are you talking about attorney fees, Jan?
Like, yeah, I mean, we're
How much have we
recouping
spent?
12,000.
No, we're paying
approximately.
12,000.
No, we're paying 12.
Oh, okay.
Versus paying
I thought we were getting
181,000, or 281,000.
Gotcha, okay.
Right, so they paid,
I thought it was, we were getting.
They're asking for a refund.
they're, right.
Right.
That's basically what
Okay.
they're asking for.
Then it makes it unclear, thank you.
Sure. Wasn't there, when Ayers first brought that to us, didn't he brought these, which he said were the most recent, and then he said we had to move pretty quickly on, but wasn't there something prior, much larger, or was that when he said that it was probably too late to do something about that? I could swear there were,
Scott, do you have a
there were 2
recollection?
instances that he brought to us, one we moved on.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is actually the second topic, which is the United Parcel Service Tax Objection Complaint.
Right.
And there was a prior settlement, and now we're shifting from rate objections where people are challenging the tax levy to evaluation objections.
Okay, I recall.
Yeah, where the taxpayer is actually saying that my assessment is too high.
Right, okay.
And there was a settlement for the 1995 through 2003 tax years,
Right.
and then another settlement from 2004, 5, and 6. And that involves a slightly different set of facts, but I can move into that if you'd like.
No, I'm
That's-
fine.
Well, that's the second memorandum that's it, right?
That's
Okay.
correct. It's really more of a status update on where that UPS case is at. As you mentioned, there was a settlement that was quite large for 95 to 2003, and then a smaller settlement for 2004, 5, and 6. And there were issues dealing with the incentive classification that the property had. There was basically a property tax incentive provided to UPS to develop that facility, which granted them a 16% level of assessment rather than the 36 or 38% level of assessment that would normally be applied to industrial or commercial properties. And because the settlement invoked that 16% level of assessment, and there were issues with when it came off and when the tax incentive ended, the county clerk actually allowed the district to file what's known as a deficiency levy, where the district was able to add over and above its property tax levy, what would normally be allowed under its property tax levy, in order to compensate for that property tax refund that had to be paid out. Now we are into the tax years, I'm trying to, 7, 8, and 9. There are a lot of different settlements. So those are the cases that are now actively in front of the court. The district, in conjunction with District 204 and the Fire Protection District, have intervened in both the 2007 and 2008 cases, and petitions to intervene will be filed in the 2009 and 2010 cases very shortly. The 2009 case was just activated earlier this year, and the 2010 case will be activated probably the first part of 2013. The 2007 case is kind of the lead case, and so the judge has been having the parties come into circuit court to engage in settlement negotiations under the heading of 2007, but with the understanding that all of the years that are open are basically at issue. And so far, the attorneys for UPS have been demanding a substantial sum of money, and we have been holding the line on a very small amount of money. There's still a great deal of difference between the parties, and at the last status hearing, it was our understanding that the plaintiff now understands that their settlement demand has to come down significantly in order for there to be a settlement.
Now, how many taxing districts will benefit from the outcome of this versus have agreed? I mean, there was us, there was Lyons, the fire district, and then there's a couple of, because the UPS property benefits many.
That's true. It would benefit every taxing agency on their tax bill. So that would also be the municipality. I haven't looked.
Park District.
Park District, Library District, if there is one.
Water reclamation.
Right. And
Right.
none of them have joined in on the battle with the three?
Well, no, they have not. And in fairness to the county and the Forest Preserve and the MWRD, because their tax base encompasses the entire county, their amount of exposure to this is not as great as the more local entities that have a much greater stake in it. But you're right, the only districts that have intervened at this point are the school districts and the Fire Protection District. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office is involved ostensibly on behalf of the other districts as well.
Scott, if I could ask what impact the assessment that the board actually contributed about 1/3 of the price for was Morales firm, Michael Morales, to assess that property, and my understanding from reading the memorandum is that their assessment was in line with what the county agreed. Basically it was 89 million, around that number, and the plaintiff, in this case UPS, was claiming 63 million. How has that been part of the discussions at this point?
Well, in addition to having to prove their case by clear and convincing evidence, which is a standard of proof somewhere between 51% and beyond a reasonable doubt, I mean, clear and convincing evidence is a pretty high legal standard by general acceptance. They also have to they have to present evidence that will convince the judge. Now, in order to meet that standard, they have to win by a lot, basically. And by submitting the Marouf's appraisal, we've made it much more difficult for them to meet that burden. So it's a great asset in the settlement negotiations, because the county is seeking an appraisal as well. But the more evidence that we have on our side, the harder it is for them to meet their burden of proof.
So are you saying then that the county did set a market value similar to the Morales appraisal? So are you saying that the county might do an additional appraisal, or are you not really sure?
Well, yes, they have indicated to us that they are seeking an additional appraisal. That would be paid for by the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. There would be no charge to the district for that. It's just something that they do in certain cases where there's large refund exposure.
But that appraisal would be dated when they do it, and our appraisal was previously, so is there, maybe some consideration rather for the change at the time?
When, in cases like this, what we ask the appraiser to do is set a date of value that's commensurate with the lien date of the property taxes. So we would ask them to value the property as of January 1st, 2007, or January 1st, 2008. And then what they do is they go in and they collect all the data that they need leading up to that point in time to develop their opinion of value as of the appropriate date.
And so they're working on that?
They are, yes.
And then once that is completed, do you think we'll be closer to closure or settlement?
We are getting closer to settlement. I don't know that the completion of the county's appraisal will necessarily bring this to a speedy resolution, because the plaintiffs have also indicated that they want to go out and get another appraisal. So it's a war of experts at this point. Everybody is really loading up on the expert witnesses.
When UPS goes and gets their new appraisal, will they be required to have their appraisal, be as of the same date, January 1st, 2007 or 8 or whatever it is, or will they be using, current property values as of today?
If they are smart, they will do it as of the date of value. In fact, I think that's one of the reasons why they want to go out and get a new appraisal, is because the appraisal that they have submitted to us through the discovery process at this point has a date of value prior to 2007. And so what they are trying to do is argue, well, this value didn't go up by that much, it still has relation to this point in time. And so one of the things that they want to do is go out and get an appraisal with a date of value that's relevant to the years at issue.
Didn't they have, and I seem to recall, and I could be wrong on this, didn't they have, wasn't their fight basically that they had a number of different tax lots within the property, and some are obviously used and some are not, so they were saying that vacant property should have a different value than, et cetera, and that's what's causing the discrepancy, and
Yes, it's a very complex property. Their vacant land for the years at issue was assessed at 22% of its fair market value. Commercial property was assessed at 38% of its fair market value. If I just said that it was taxed at 22% of its value, that was incorrect. What I meant to say was it's assessed at 22% of its value. Commercial at 38, industrial at 36. And then you had the incentive classes at 16%. So there were at least a dozen different parcels with different assessed value, assessment levels in there. And
so that's taken into consideration when we get the lump sum total of 89 million, or 63 million, or 83 million.
Yeah, what we have gone through and done is figured out a fair market value for each one.
Okay, that's all.
Other questions?
Anything more at this time?
Mark, any-
Scott, thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. We'll move on then to the call testing report.
Thanks, Scott. All right. As the board is aware, the fall testing report includes ITBS, ISAT, and we have some Ames Web data, which is the new DIBBLs, and the larger presentation on the Ames Web will be in June, but we give some kind of baseline data that we talk about here. So let me just get into kind of the summary of findings. First of all, the grade 1 cohort is one kind of barometer that we always look at in the fall. We've been doing that for quite some time. I'm not going to talk about it much in the summary here because I've got a slide that explains it in more detail. But overall, the we're seeing here is looking pretty good. The second item is math computation scores for all cohorts. One cohort stayed the same from 1 year to the next, and all the rest went up. The greater gains were grades 3 and grades 4, but we still have some issues here, and certainly the next one right here. I'll show you these scores, but for the grade 6 cohort, their scores did go up from grade 5 to 6, but they still are unacceptably low. And we've been working very hard to correct that. Grade 4, as we just talked about, they posted the highest ITBS scores overall, and really pretty impressive, particularly for this test. And so that's very good news. The other area of concern, overall, that the board has to be aware of is the grade 8 cohort. This would have been the kids in 7th grade last year, and this year they're in grade 8. We rarely see any fall in our math scores. This is not computation, this is math. And this cohort went from 69 to 64, and we've been looking very carefully at that. That teacher who taught those kids is not with us this year. The next item I wanted to point out here is that when we transitioned to ISAT, that Pleasantdale, and this is kind of a big deal, we don't really talk about our scores on ISAT that much, but this is actually a pretty big deal, is that all of our subgroups made adequate yearly progress. And to give you an idea, I think there was 1 or 2 high schools in the entire state of Illinois that made AYP, and of all the area schools, us and I think Highlands 106 made AYP, but no other districts did. So what that tells us is, those kind of special populations of special ed, English language learners and so on, we did particularly well with those groups, so that's good. And in terms of overall ISAT, I'll talk more about that, but what we kind of look at is to be first or second on all the subtests, and that is true for 8 of the 14. And I'll get into some of the details of that when we get to it. The one thing I wanted to do, though, is we've been explaining to the board and to parents that we have a more difficult test, but you've never seen anything about this test. So I thought you don't have this in your packet, but I included it in my presentation last night with parents. And actually, oh wait, before we get to that, sorry, I'm ahead of myself. This is the Ames Web for, this is the same group of students. This is last year, kindergarten, and that's this year. And this is nonsense word fluency. And what this test, it's a one-on-one test. And what we do with this is there's various nonsense words that the kids pronounce. And so what it tells us is that they have phonemic skills. And where these kids were last year to this year is actually pretty impressive. So we have 90% of those who are in low risk to start the year. So that the good news there is that the progress that they made in kindergarten, there was not much what we call summer loss. And of these 6% of these kids, we've discussed when Kelly Volleyball presented that we're getting more diverse. Of that, that's 4 kids. 1 child was not in, it was new this year. 1 child has an IEP, 1 is an English language learner, so only 1 of those kids was actually a general population student. So overall, good. So what the board is going to see in June is the next week. We also give this test to these kids in the winter, and then we give it to them in May. So you'll see just kind of how that goes over time. So we have reason to be optimistic about that. Okay, now get down to the ITBS. This is an actual problem with, I changed enough of this problem, so if you're in the audience as a parent, you want to copy this down and give it to your child to think they're going to pass this. It's changed enough, but that won't work, okay? But it's similar enough. This is one of the math problems, and so I would ask the board to tell me, what do you think is the grade level where the kids get this problem? Anybody want to venture a guess?
Fourth grade?
Mm-hmm.
You say 4th grade?
4th grade.
Anybody else want to venture a guess? Anybody know the answer? Okay. Well, this is a problem that the kids get in 5th grade, okay? And, you know, I can recall this is the kind of problems I got in graduate school with my statistics classes. And actually, I'm not positive what the answer is because I didn't look, but I do believe that it is B because why? It's a smaller population, it's just the kids at school. So there's a lot of statistics and probability type questions on this test. And I've got another problem I'd like the board to look at. This is also a 5th grade problem, and this is a computation, one that quite a number of kids got wrong. And what do you think they did with this problem? Which answer do you think was the most common one or if they got it wrong, which one do you think they selected?
D.
Yeah, D. Exactly, because precisely. So what's different about the computation now? It's not just straight computation anymore. The kids get a lot of these kind of problems, and also either fraction, decimal, where there's some either reducing or lowest common denominator or that kind of thing. So when I had a pretty good turnout yesterday at the parent meetings. We did one in the morning and one in the evening. And they definitely we were unanimous in the fact that they noticed that the curriculum was more difficult this year, particularly in math. So I just thought it would be useful for the board to kind of get an idea, you know, what are these kids getting that's different than what they got before? And this, I hope, gives you some idea.
What grade was this?
This is 5th grade. Okay, so let's, these are our 4th graders, and as I said before, you know, we just categorically had, you know, some pretty good news here. You know, what you want to see is, you know, pretty much steady improvement across the board. You know, I don't feel too bad about keeping this at 85, but you know, the math, the computation, there was a lot of new things the kids had to learn. We talked about this before, a lot of 2- and 3-digit numbers that they, you know, typically we didn't introduce those until maybe 4th grade. So, you know, all that's been changed, and you know, it's kind of going, I think, in the right direction with that.
Could I ask why on this we don't have the word analysis or the listening like we did with the 3rd grade?
Because it's only in, they don't take that after
It's only
3rd grade.
in 3rd grade?
Mhm, that's right. Yeah. Okay, here's what I talked about before. This math computation here. So we, this needs to be 10 points higher at a minimum, and you know, that's what we're working at. So what we've done is we've conducted a detailed item analysis of all these problems. We know the types of problems that these kids are getting wrong. You saw one of them. So they're really, they take this at the beginning of 6th grade, so it really is a reflection of their 5th grade experience.
Right, but the question that we saw was that,
Fifth
is that
grade.
with the 5th graders, the 5th grade, current 5th grade
5th grade,
students?
right. Yeah, there's similar kind of decimal. So both for, my point, sorry I'm not clear on this. For 5th and 6th grade, the computation of fractions and decimals was where the kids struggled. The other overall thing with math that we saw, we get to like the top 15 errors, and I have them right here. The top math error is in the application of real-world geometry. So that's one way with the Common Core standards. You know, I've mentioned this before, if the board recalls. There is a lot of application, you know, in a real-world kind of way, and they're not easy problems. And so, you know, we've got to work a lot more with that kind of thing. The one encouraging thing is like the basic kind of computation errors. Really, they've moved down the list in terms of those being common errors.
I have a question. I think it's kind of piggybacking off of hers. Now, I'm looking at the test from last year, the testing report, and there were more categories.
That was because we were comparing 2 different forms of the test.
No, because the test we took last fall, wasn't that the newest form?
Right,
And
but it was
isn't this-
compared to the year before, and the year before had different subtests. So when Wick had to do the comparisons, he had to categorize so they were comparable.
So the testing report that we got in January, it
Was
was the same
comparing-
form, but they were comparing it to the past?
No, there were two different forms. One was Form C that was given the previous year, and then last year was Form E, so you're comparing Form C with Form E. So if you recall, there was, the scores had to be converted
Yeah.
because they were different sets of norms.
So they didn't do like spelling, capitalization, punctuation?
No, these are the current, subtests that a sixth grader would take. Now, within, like written expression, there are, different domains that are aligned with the Common Core. So if you looked at your child's report when you got it home, there would be a section in there that would break down conventions of writing. This is one subtest, either the written expression and conventions of writing. So those things are now subsumed within those.
The domains were at the bottom of the thing.
Correct, right. So if you look at those, it'll tell you how many problems have to do with spelling, how many you have to do, whereas before, in the old test, those were broken out. So that's why it's good. This year, we're looking apples to apples, and we don't have to convert anything.
So what you're suggesting is that last year when Wick broke them out, he went almost detailed line by line so that he could bring a comparison to the Form C from the prior year. He took the Form E test and literally broke it out to the separate.
Yes, yeah, it's the only way you could compare them.
So what about the tests that they took in May? Like,
Those are Form C tests.
they took an easier test in May than in
Well,
the
it's a
fall?
different form of the test. It's the same test they took before. It's normed differently. And the reason you do it is you cannot give the same form of the ITBS within the same year. You have to use a different form.
So in the fall they took E, in the spring they took C.
Yes, and if you recall, in the spring, we just give reading comprehension, and then we give the math. We don't give the language, it's just to get a post measure.
I guess I'm still confused. So in the springtime, it was a different form, not necessarily easier, just a different form?
It's a different form, but the norms would be normed a bit higher because it was an older norm test.
So, okay, so, because I'm looking at the June testing report said the third grade, let's go back to third grade, that the scores went down, so from the fall to June, they went down, and then they went up this year. Are we gonna see the scores from the spring, like as compared to like how they are now?
Yes, I provide this, that's the June testing report.
But we didn't get them in June. That's what I'm saying. We just got this summary in June. We didn't get the actual scores. So you
Yeah, I don't-
compare apples to apples. How can we compare if we don't have the report as it is in that format and in the format that's in the book? It was just.
Let
like
me try to
this.
explain it again and try to do a better job at it. Okay, what we're looking at here from fall of 2011 to fall of 2012, these are both Form E tests.
Right.
Okay, so the same subtests that were given in fall of 2011 were given this time. Now, because these are normed the same, that there is no conversion here.
Right.
All right, so if you're comparing, now, and this is where it got confusing last year because we were looking at, when you actually got the report, it was in January.
Right.
But it was Form C.
Converted to E.
Right, so whenever you transition like that, those scores are converted and the subtests are not identical.
Could they convert the spring scores to the E, from the C to
Yes.
the E? They could do that.
Yes, that can be done. But the thing you have to remember is there's a lot of statistical error included in the conversion. That's why the best thing is that you're looking at the same form of the test at 2 points in time. The most accurate comparisons would be Form E in 2011 and Form E in 2012. Okay.
Brittany,
What
you're
form
s-
are we gonna give them in spring
Right.
2013?
Form C.
So we would compare spring to spring then.
And then fall to fall?
Yeah, and you can also do
But-
fall to spring, but you have to convert those so you're able to compare.
I'd like to
That
see
wouldn't-
them though, I think. Because I mean, if the scores went down from fall to spring, even though it was a different test, but now they went up back in the fall again, I'm kind of like wondering what shot them up over the summer. Usually it's the summer slide. Like, and I know it's a different test, so that's why I'd like to almost see the conversion, to kind of figure out what we did right. Like, we did something right, apparently.
Not only that, but the Form C was the old test?
Right.
And
No,
that was,
actually, they
or was
were-
it just a different form? Was it based on the new standards, but a different form? Or was it, you know, the old test? Because the reason is, like, we've already identified that C, which is the old test, is easier than E. Because I know we had this conversation last January where, like, the results went down. You know, if you didn't do a conversion, you just had the old C
Correct, right.
to E, and the results went down, and like, we're sitting here in shock, and yet the woman, I forget her name, stood and said,
Kathy Lawrence.
"Oh no, these are very good test scores, something to be proud of." But so I was just wondering if you gave a C, why a C test result would go down?
Well,
if
what
it
do you
was
mean
the
that
easier
it went
test?
down?
Well, that's what you said. Grade 3 ITBS math problem solving and computation scores indicate negative fall to spring gains. So this is what you told us in
Mhm.
June, the gains went negative, would be down.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
We never did get those numbers, right?
We never got the numbers, but he just, I guess because he said it was a different form, but
No, we
Right,
did-
so I
is
think
those
what
numbers
you're asking,
compared
can
to-
you go back to the grade 3, ITBS grade 3? First, or I'm sorry,
Four.
grade 4, right. So what Gina's saying is that from the E to the C, so from January to May, the results went down. Then we have what we typically call the summer slide, but in this case, it did just the opposite. They went up, and that's
over
why
the summer, what
she's
accounted for it?
inquiring what
Were
accounted
kids
for it
getting
going up
tutoring?
on a harder test.
Yeah, well, I'd have to have all the scores in front of me to really give you an accurate description. I'm not prepared
Would we get
to
that though,
talk
about,
about.
like maybe,
Yeah, but what I'm telling you is that the most accurate depiction of performance is this, because it's Form E to Form E, okay?
Mark, if we were to have the scores that we received, or we didn't see them in June, to have those converted, what would it show us, and what would be the benefit, and who would have to do that? Is that something that Riverside Publishing does, or is that something that we have to hire John to do? Or is-
I would have to, I'm just not prepared to answer that.
All right, maybe that's a conversation we can then have outside of the meeting, and we can figure out exactly,
Yeah, the question is, what's the value of that? Again, the one thing you want to do is, you want to leave behind those things that you have to convert. So once you get with a certain form, you like to stay with it, because every time you get into converting scores, it's confusing.
I'm not doubting that, but I think in this particular case, because we are brand new to the new form, maybe we do entertain exploring, just see what it would take, and then be able to provide an answer. I mean, because we are going to a brand new form. If this was 5 years into it, 6 years into it, and we said, oh geez, let's go back 10 years ago, forget it, but, I mean,
well,
we
talking
just,
1 year.
we're only
let's get
talking
a
1
more
year.
accurate picture.
Right.
And then too, are these numbers based, these numbers for fall 2011, 2012, are these again based off of where they rank in a certain area of comparable schools? Or is this a percentage right, the average percentage correct answers?
These are the scores that the board always receives for the Iowa Test of Basic Skills from the national percentile ranks. So
Okay.
what you see here, whoops.
But remember how she said
Now, let me
that you
just point out to
compare
you.
comparable demographics, right?
Well, this is,
That was-
this is normed nationally. So this compares us with all districts nationally.
Throughout, not just, so this is kids that are in the Bronx taking this and kids that are in Kenilworth. Throughout the country, this is where we rank.
These are national norms.
Okay.
Right, that's what this
Because I
provides.
thought that she said, that Kathy Lawrence said that they were based on similar demographics or something like that when she came here.
No, she didn't say that. These are national norms. That's the only thing the board has ever seen with the Iowa Test of Basic Skills. It's designed to show how you compare to the nation. Okay.
so, I'm looking at the January testing report for the current third graders, which are these kids last year. You have math computation at 76, and here it's at 77, so did they go up 3 points or 2?
That could have been the converted score. No, I don't recall if it was converted from Form E to C or from Form C to E.
Well, this was from C to E, was what came out in January. I'm looking at the January, you know, I have the board packet from January, and it says they got a 76, and here you have a 77. Well, if they went up 3 points instead of 2, that's good. So I'm just wondering though,
Yeah,
is
there
this
could
a
have been
different-
some rounding, I mean, so it's,
Oh, so maybe it's rounded?
yeah. I took these scores exactly off of the reports that we get from ITBS, and last year we had John Wick do it, and he may have done some rounding. So it could be 1 point either way, but anyway, these here are actually from the report we get from Riverside. Okay, so I'm talking, let me just move on.
Didn't we talk about getting scores for people that were in the same or similar demographics? Because this means nothing to me nationally. I thought that we talked about getting, so that we could kind of compare how we rank, like we do with the feeder schools, we know which ones, you know, we're basically on the same group. Remember, I know that we'd asked, is there any way we could get that? Because, you know, if I see 69 or 70% reading throughout the nation, I don't think that's all that great. But if it's against you personally, you know, when we're doing in the 90s on the ISATs, right? We're averaging in the 90s.
You're comparing yourself to yourself, and you're comparing yourself to the only statistically valid reference point you can compare it to, which is the national base.
Well, we're not comparing ourselves to ourselves.
Yes, we are.
We're looking at our growth.
We're looking at cohorts.
But so, okay, fine. So 1 point, I mean, that doesn't tell me too much. I'm just curious how we rank with people in similar demographics, like we do with our other stuff.
Okay, that's when we'll get to the ISAT, we'll talk about that.
But what you're questioning is whether or not ITBS has that option.
Correct.
No, it does not. No, these are national norms.
I could have sworn Maura said that there was some. Or she
I
just
thought the
said-
same thing you did, because we could be at 100% and some other school be at 20%, which is why we're now at 70%.
Right.
If that's what you were,
Exactly. So,
We can, you know, again, we can follow up with Kathy and get clarity on
We
it
can
as to
look at
whether
the
or not
note tape,
ITBS
too,
has
and hear what
that
she had to
as
say.
a feature.
Okay.
Thank you.
So ITBS current 8th graders, again, this is something we're paying very close attention to. A lot of the problems they've missed here have to do with algebraic equations with positive and negative. And, you know, so we've done our item analysis on this, and the teachers are aware of it. And we're also prepping these kids for Explore, so we're working on that as well. If you look here, the one thing that really is, we've done quite well, and remember this is, you know, not an easy test, and it's more difficult norms. And in English language arts, we're, you know, when you're up, you know, 80 percentile and above, that's our average score. So if you look at grade 4, the average student is at the 89th percentile nationally. You know, that is pretty impressive. The areas where we need to work more, this is grade 6, I've talked about this, and this is grade 8, and what of course brought us down here. In this case, it was more an issue of computation, and here where the actual math scores fell. But, you know, coming up here, you know, where we've made these adjustments, it looks pretty good. Okay, now ISAT, so we'll talk about comparisons. Okay, what we have here are the comparisons of all the feeder districts. So this is Pleasantdale, and these are the other 5. And we've just listed them A, B, C, D, and so on. So this, you know, you can look at, this is 3rd grade in 2009-10. This is 2010-11 and 2011-12. Of course, the ISAT is a different test. It is not as heavy on the computation, it's more math problem solving and concepts. So you can see Pleasantdale, you know, we typically 199, 99. So here we're tied for, you know, first in the township. So, you know, comparison-wise, you know, we rank pretty well with that. Now, when you get to, I'm not going to go through every single score here, I just wanted to show the board a few other things. 8th grade reading is another thing that we look at. So one of our goals is that our kids are, by the time they leave us in 8th grade, that they are at a minimum at the national average on the ITBS, and that they meet and exceeds on ISAT. And we do pretty well with that. You know, mind you, this is the group now that now is in ninth grade. And so we had the highest scores in the whole township when it comes to eighth grade reading. And the math I think we were second that year. It's in your packet. I included this. This information comes from a website called the Interactive Illinois Report Card. Anybody can go on and get this information. But I thought it kind of put things in perspective as well. This includes both math and reading. So what this website does is it takes all the scores and it puts it into like a percent of meets and exceeds. Now, this is Butler 53, this is Hinsdale 101, Western Springs 101, and here's Pleasantdale, Gower, and so on. And I can tell you from certainly these schools up that we are by far the most diverse school, both in terms of economic disadvantagement and number of special ed kids, number of kids that are English language learners. And even with that, even with those demographics, we're really among the best here. The other thing you have to remember is that there's probably 2% of these kids, at least 1% that don't even go to school here because they're private placements, and they still take the test, and even though they may not be in school here, they're included in our scores. So I just thought it was kind of useful for the board to see, and the audience as well, that when you're talking about how do we compare with schools that are demographically similar to us, is that we outperform them. We do not have, Butler, for example, has 400 students, and if you know Oak Brook, in what the economic, average economics and that, in the diversity and all of that, this is very impressive. That, and that's why we're in the rankings that you see in the newspaper. The reason why we get the awards we get is because we're in the top 5%. But if you look at it in relation to our demographics, we're really, surpass any and all districts that have demographics like we do. Okay, questions? Okay.
Okay, I just have one question.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm looking at the ISAT scores from last year, like last year's fourth grade math class. Okay, so in fourth grade math, 50% of the kids take fifth grade math, correct? They're in the above level?
More or less.
50% are in, half are in above level, half are not. So I'm just curious as to why more than 50%, okay, so they're taking, in fourth grade, they're taking a fourth grade test, but they're doing fifth grade math. So shouldn't at least 50% of them exceed instead of just meet? Okay, so in fourth grade, 50% of the class, am I making sense?
Yeah, no, you are,
In
because
fourth
that
grade,
was,
50% of the kids take above level, so they don't take fourth grade math, they take fifth grade math. If you look at the ISAT scores for our fourth grade last year, 50% should be exceeding the score, not just meeting the score, because they're taking
because
this
they're
whole...
taking a class up, right. Can you address the whole meet and exceed, because, where except for like one cohort, for the most part, from one year to the next, the meets percentage went up while the exceeds percentage went down, even though the score may have gone up?
Can you, any particular grade level?
No, it doesn't hurt. We can use, I know there was one where it was the opposite, so I'll go with, let's go with third grade who are now fourth grade.
Okay, so if you look at
2010, 11, if you go to the third grade chart, which is on page 7, and look at 2010, 11 reading, and then go to the page 8, fourth grade chart, which, so they're now 2011, 12, the number of children who, the percentage went from 90% to 94, so our overall percentage went up on the meets and exceeds, but the percentage that used to be in exceeds dropped, while the percentage that used to be in meets went up. And that was, I think with the exception of one grade level, you could almost say that across the board here.
Yeah, the only way that this makes sense in interpretation is that you compare it with how other districts went as well. Because from one year to the next, the way the test is designed, that it is idiosyncratic to the particular grade level that you're in. For example, if you look at page 8 where you have, I'm looking at math. So you basically have, I think 50, if you look off to the left, I'm eyeballing this, maybe 55% of the kids met and 45 or so exceeded. So it's about half and half. A little more meets than exceeds. Then go back to third grade. And if you look at third grade in 2010, 2011, you can see that we had all districts, not just Pleasantdale, had a lot more kids in the exceeds than the meets. So what you would look at there is, did we swing differently than that group, than everybody else? And you can't. And I don't notice there a lot.
I just looked at ours.
I
all
noticed
the grade levels.
Yeah, I would, looking at this, I would say, like, for example, District C, that I don't see that there's a wild fluctuation from, one year to the next with this.
Maybe you could put this up there so the audience could see what we're talking about, if you don't mind. They have no idea what we're talking about.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I wanted you to address it because I'd asked you that before.
Right. No, that's a good question. That's the thing, remember now the ISAT is going to be gone in a couple of years, and it's probably a good thing because it just is a very difficult test to get longitudinal data. The only way it really has any meaning is if you look at it compared to other districts that are like you. From year to year, it's not meant to be a longitudinal measure.
Quickly, for Gina's sake, can you flip to page 7 and 8? Be able to flip back and forth, okay? All right, so if you go to, I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you look at, we'll go down with 4th grade math, okay? If you look at the 2011-12, we have X percentage in the exceeds and a higher percentage in meets, okay?
Right.
Now, if you flip to page 7, stay down at the bottom in math, look in the middle column, those are the same students. That was when they were in 3rd grade.
Right.
Okay, we had far greater in exceeds than we did in meets. So my question is, or was, certainly the percentage went up. Well, in this example, it didn't. It stayed the same, 99%. Okay, but in a lot of them, the percentage went up. My question is, while the percentage went up, far fewer children exceeded and far greater met. And what Mark was saying is that if you then take that same comparison, because I did that for each of our cohorts, in only one case it went the other way. What Mark was saying just now was, if you do that same comparison for every single school that's listed here, the 7, the same thing could be said.
Right.
So something altered in the test.
Well, the test gets harder each year, correct, Leandra? I mean, because there's more on it.
A few years.
What is that?
It's been a few years for me.
Well, there's more, okay, 3rd grader doesn't know as much as a 4th grader should know. A 4th grader knows more because they have another year under their belt.
No. But these are the same students. The 3rd grader knew all the way through 3rd grade math, and the 4th grader knew all the way through 4th grade math. Because they take the test at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So they didn't have, it's not like I'm comparing a 4th grader to a 3rd grader. I'm comparing the same student in 3rd grade and then that same student in 4th grade. That's what my question was centered around.
The same student here to here.
Correct.
You would have probably less exceeding because the test has gotten harder.
But they have a whole other year of math under their belt as well.
Well, refresh my memory.
I mean, it doesn't matter, he explained it to me.
Right.
I was just trying to explain, you said a minute ago, I don't know what they're talking about, I wanted to explain what they were talking about.
Mark, isn't it for ISATs, if they score like 40%, from 40% to like 60-some%, that means that they meet, and then if it's over 60%, then they exceed? I mean,
Well,
the bar is really low.
One of the, One
right?
of the,
Isn't it like-
yeah, one of the justified criticisms of the ISAT is that it depends, it's a long convoluted explanation, but it's the way that these are set, it's really high stakes because meeting adequate yearly progress is determined as to when the meets and exceeds are set, and that's set by the state. So there's been adjustments at the state level in terms of how those things have been set over time. So when they do that, and the trend by and large has been to
Lower
have them
bar.
go lower, so more districts meet adequate yearly progress, it's called. And
Right.
so that's been the history of it. So it's very difficult. I mean, if you went back 3 or 4 or 5 years and you try to compare that, even at the same grade level, the cutoff would have been changed.
But that's why, with what you're saying, how the test changed, you would expect, if the bar is being lowered, that we should have more kids exceed, especially in math when they're taking another year ahead, and that's the opposite of what happened.
Well, you would expect that if the test was comparable from 3rd grade to 4th grade, 5th grade to 6th grade. So if you look at 3rd grade, for example, where you had the same group of kids, no matter what year you look at, we had many more kids in the exceeds categories, as did every other district. Okay, so if you go to the next, to 4th, or, and it'll vary, you'll see that, whether it's science or reading or math, it depends on the grade level and it depends on the subject area. So again, the only way this test has relevance is that you compare how you swing with other districts. And if you look at Pleasantdale, and actually if you go to that website I referenced, and you followed a 10-year trend, I think they give you a 10-year trend, Pleasantdale basically over that time period I think went from the high 80s, meet and exceeds, to 96. Then you can compare that with other districts with similar demographics. And what you'll see because I've actually done this, if you go to the list of districts that I saw there and you looked at it, you would see over that same time period that we've exceeded improvement more than these other districts have. So that gives you some information that we've improved according to this test at a rate higher than other districts.
And basically, all we're using this information is to compare how we rank with other districts. We're not using any of this data to figure out our curriculum. We're using ITBS data to try to plan our curriculum.
And our
Except for-
common assessments.
And our common assessments. So really, this is really,
For state funding.
right, doesn't mean a whole lot.
Good piece-
But I
good
still am
piece of
surprised
funding.
that if you've got 50% of our kids in 4th grade doing 5th grade math, that only 50% are exceeding.
Well, at the same regard, you can look at 3rd grade and say, well, we have half the kids that are in, say, above level, and 80% of those kids are exceeding. Then why don't we have 80% of the kids in above level? If you use that logic, you would also make that same statement. But what I'm telling you is because of the nature of this test, from one year to the next is not comparable. That's just the nature of it.
Time and money.
Well, it'll be interesting, just let me kind of close if I could on this point. The good news is that when we get to, 2 years from now would be 2015, 16, when the new test is in place, it'll be an entirely new test. It'll be more like the ITBS, but it'll be online. That's the direction it's going.
We do the ITBS for prediction, right? For which predictions?
We have.
We don't do that anymore for predictions? Are we still doing predictions for the kids?
No.
So, really?
Yeah, did we just-
Like, that's new to me. Did you know that?
Well, we got the information for the 8th grade to predict their explorers, but, that's really was kind of, at this point, as far as the services that Dr. Wick gave us, the most valuable things were not the predicted scores, they were the common errors. And we get that information now from Riverside.
So why are we taking the ITBS? I thought it was a predictor for Explore and Act.
It does do that, but the prediction, and I presented this to the parents last night, and I don't have the slide here. Riverside does provide us with the how ITBS predicts the ACT. and Explore is just another test within that
Right.
family. So, you know, what I've got committed to memory is that a score of 95 to 100 on the ITBS, so that's the core composite score, is predictive of an ACT score between 30 and 36, which is 36 would be a perfect score in the ACT.
So Dr. Wick's not predicting anymore, he's just error reporting? Is that what is that what you're saying?
Well, we'll have to decide whether we even need his services in the future.
In that 95 to 99, is that only for the 8th grade class? Or is that, if he were to give that prediction for 5th grade, which I think is when we started giving predictions, if you were to give that prediction for 5th grade, could the same thing be said for 5th grade?
If you, our history with Dr. Wick on this is that by 6th grade, it's a more accurate prediction.
Right.
So he combined 5th and 6th grade, but that was with a different form of the test.
Understood, but if he had said a 99 in 5th grade and a 99 in 6th grade, would that equate to a 30 to 36?
Correct. That's correct. That range, it's a range because there's error.
Understood.
So was last year the last year he did predictions then for us?
Mm-hmm.
See, 'cause I thought when we had Kathy Lawrence here, I thought Kathy had said that ITBS was going to begin being able to
Correct.
predict what their future score was going to be,
On,
ECT. That's what I thought. But
No,
that was a year
yeah.
ago, and.
Is that part of what we pay for?
yeah, I thought that's, I mean, I don't
No.
know, I'm confused, because I thought we paid for him to predict every year.
But that wasn't, I would like to answer that question with what I believe, okay? But I do want to ask a question, real quick. Is that prediction part of the fees that we pay Riverside?
It is.
Does that information go out to the parents like WIC's information used to? Because I mean, I don't look at it as
No, we don't get, we haven't.
steadily as my
at this
wife,
point,
but I
no.
don't recall seeing it on there.
No, it's not on the parent report.
I'd like an idea in the future, for a future topic, of what information Riverside does provide versus what we provide to the parents. 'Cause we used to give that information through WIC, and now we're saying WIC's not going to, but now we're not giving it. Because we're saying WIC's not going to, or it is suggested that he's not going to, because we're gonna get that information from Riverside, but if we're not gonna turn around and give that information to the parents.
Yeah, Riverside is evolving with the information that they give us. If you recall, last year, they were not prepared to even.
Right, I
post
recall
scores
last
on
year, and they
tests.
gave us a refund because of that, but
Right.
this year's different.
Yeah, and so I can give you some examples of,
I don't need it, I would just
Oh,
love
okay.
in the future an
Oh,
idea of what they
absolutely.
can
Yeah.
give us. What's available for what fee, and then maybe let us pick and choose what, we'd like to see.
Yeah, and
Now,
then-
to address
yeah.
your question, that's not my understanding of WIC, that was a side benefit of WIC. My understanding for the WIC, there was a side benefit, okay, which was nice. My understanding was that he was able to assess this and then to address what Karen brought up a little while ago, which is go back and compare it to, I'm not gonna use the word deficiencies, but potential deficiencies within the curriculum. And the side benefit was to get the predicted score. Where I think I'm hearing you say,
And-
hey, that was the benefit.
He's asked the board members not to converse electronically with members of the audience.
Who's doing that? It's my daughter.
Okay.
Thank you, Rick.
And then to address what you said a little while ago about the waste of time and money, you know what? For the last 7 years, that's been a topic for ISAT, and just not too long ago, we chatted and, asked about the legalities of dropping it
Can I see what she said?
totally, so, anyway, I'll be quiet.
Well, and I have a question. So we paid HM Receivables Company, and that was for ITBS, and then where's Riverside come in? I'm confused. Is it one and the same? Okay, thank you.
But let me just, address that one topic. I don't see it necessary to, continue with the services of John Wick with the new information that we're getting now from Riverside, because it's, incredibly detailed, and it provides error reports that, before they weren't providing us, so.
Didn't
I'm
we
Mark,
very
do
pleased
this
with it.
contract though, in like in June?
But it would probably be
When did
good to
we do
have it
We
on.
paid 20 grand.
It would probably be good just to have it on, perhaps next month, or we can figure out what would be a good time to do it, where I think the entire board would probably benefit from understanding better, as Mark pointed out, exactly what can Riverside provide now, a year later. We know what they said they could provide, and we know what they couldn't deliver on, but now we are a year later, what exactly can they deliver? What has John been doing for us for over the years? And let's compare the two and really see where we should be going from now.
So
But
he's,
John,
Yeah, I just wanted the board to be aware, we're at a point to transition, and also to save some money.
so he's not gonna do the error reports or anything anymore, is that what you're saying? I'm just confused. mean, this is
I
the
don't know,
first I'm
that's why
hearing
I'm
it.
I
asking,
don't know
let's have it on a
Sorry.
future agenda, and let's talk about
Thank you.
the services of John.
Perfect.
In relation to what we've done with ITBS, whether that's next month, we can look and see what we've got on the agenda. But I think that discussion
Well, both the
has to take
services of
place.
John as well as to Mark's point.
Right,
what
the
Riverside
ITBS,
can-
what is Riverside Publishing providing for us that they might not have provided before?
Yeah, but overall, we're really quite pleased this year with the service we've gotten. Scores came back quickly, the reports, the interactive reports are much better, and we can get a lot of more detailed information, so it's a good thing. Next is financial projections. Long-range financial projections, just by way of background, Catherine's pulling that up. The finance advisory team met, that is Karen, Mark Robley, and Catherine and myself, and the same thing we do every year with the 5-year projections is that we set some assumptions. And those assumptions are listed in your board packet. I'm not going to go through any of those, but just to remind the board that an assumption is only an assumption. I mean, if you would go back 5 years ago and try to predict what property values would be, you probably wouldn't have been particularly accurate. So that's just indicative of any time you make projections. So the general rule that we tried to follow is that our assumptions are conservative. And if you look at those, I think by and large they are. Karen and Mark, do you want to add anything before we have Catherine guide us through that?
No, I think that's good to Catherine.
Okay, all right. Well, as Mark said, the finance advisory team met at the end of October 30th, and we did put in the assumptions of CPI. We had to put in assumptions of CPI, and we estimate those at 2.5%. We put in the earned interest rates estimated at 2.2%. And then we also estimated our EAVs, okay? And it's pretty conservative, as Mark had mentioned. For 2013 to 2016, we did estimate 2.5, and then gradually move up to 3 million, and then 4 million, and thereafter 5 million. Also, with the Ed Fund, after the contract ends in 2014-15, we are estimating a growth of at 3%. Special education costs, we have also included those in, increasing at 2.5% per year. And then technology capital expenditures. For 2012-2013, we did spend $429,550 for the iPads, for the laptops. And so we are putting in the assumption that there will be zero for capital expenditures for the years 2013, 2014 to 2016, 2017. And then after that, putting in $500,000 for 17-18. And that's why if you look at the cash flows, there's a slight increase. The red line over here is overall expenditures. The green line is the overall revenues.
So what happens in 17-18 from an ed fund standpoint?
Ed fund will be the technology equipment.
I mean, not from a fund standpoint, I'm from an expense standpoint,
From the,
right?
from the,
Looks like
right.
in 17-18, it's just,
It's
for some reason.
It's a bump because we put in the 500,000 for technology. And so it shows, and with the CPI increases and CPI, when it does the calculation for all this various years, somehow this bump looks higher than the $500,000.
Yeah, it looks like $1.2 million or something.
And then over here with the O&M, If the board remembers, we did the $750,000 abatement for bonds, and then for next year, we are doing $1 million abatement for bonds, and I'm taking it out of the O&M fund. That's why you see the expenditures going up under the O&M fund. This cash flow over here shows the bond abatement of $750,000 and the $1 million, $750,000 and $1 million. And if I pull up this is our actual cash flow without the abatement, without taking from fund balance. It actually shows our cash flows being revenues more than expenditures. Okay. So going back here, this shows a dip over here, and that's because by the year 2019 to 2020, that school year, that's when our last debt service payment would end. So after that, we have no more debt service left. So if you look at fund balance, it shows a very, very strong fund balance. Especially look at the blue line, that's where our debt service ends. This is our overall fund balance. So, overall it shows that we are in a very strong financial position. And my only worry is that we are having too much fund balance. Any questions?
Just a future construction projects. Did you
Here, I think you
Oh,
did.
okay, I'm sorry. I kind of went in. And then other than technology capital expenditures, we have the construction projects. This summer, 2013, 2014, we'll be doing the roofing project over at the elementary school, and that is the section where we just did the masonry work. So it's above from the art and music room, that area, up to the main office area. And then 2014, 2015, we are not expecting any huge big ticket items. 2015, 2016, we'll be replacing the elementary rooftop chiller, which is up on the second floor. And
It'll
then
be 30 years old then, so that we were.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. 30?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
And then 2016, 2017, after removing the chiller, we're thinking of putting it down, instead of on the rooftop, is to the back of the school. And then we will do the roofing project by that area. It's on the second floor area. And that, we're estimating about $400,000.
To move the air conditioners, is that what you said?
No, replacing the whole roof. We'll do the chiller first, remove the chiller, and then do the...
Oh, that's the 2015 is remove the chiller.
2015, remove the chiller, 2016, 17, do the roof. But that, those are estimations. We still have to talk to the architect and see what is the best way of doing that. Do we do the chiller and the roof at the same time? Do we do it 1 year after? So timing is important.
I think when we did the construction on the office, that they did some roof work as well then, didn't they?
The
They put
renovation.
the AC units up and stuff, the HVAC systems, did
They
they?
put in a new air conditioning unit.
Right.
They didn't do roof work at all up there?
No.
when they were doing that?
I don't remember doing any roof work.
Okay, I was just curious, because I know they were up there working, so I
Right, I
thought
think
maybe
it was for the HVAC.
they had to do something to patch up whatever they were taking out or putting on.
And two, I'd like to mention on the technology capital, Catherine's agreed to keeping a conclusive listing of all of our expenses, a capital and asset list, kind of how we had it. We're going to keep it updated
Oh, no.
and try to monitor our expenditures.
Nice.
Any other questions?
Okay, last item is just a quick update on strategic planning. The core team reviewed on November 8th the draft action plans that the Curriculum Council was charged in writing. Lisa's on the Curriculum Council, and we worked quite really a lot of hours to gain consensus on 3 plans. Those were, as I said, advanced to the core team. The core team met for about 2 hours, I believe, and we received really good input from the core team. And so the next thing that's going to happen, the board will get copies of all the input from the core team, and you already received the draft plans and last week in the weekly update. And so the Curriculum Council on November 29th, I believe, we meet all day and we'll be revising the plans based on the core team update. Those revised plans will go to the core team, and we'll solicit input from core team members. And if necessary, the core team may meet one more time again to look at the plans before they come back to the board. So in terms of timing, the board may or may not get the action plans in December, depending on whether the core team feels it needs to meet again. But I fully expect no later than January that the board would receive the final plans for review and consideration. We're looking at 3 plans. Mark and Beth?
No, that was pretty much it. That's Thursday, and we're not, there was great discussion on how to assist the teachers with the implementation of the work that needs to be done, from the curriculum rewrites that we've been doing to the standards-based grading rewrites that we've been doing, the new common assessments, and now we go into the potential rewriting necessary for whatever common core is coming along with ISAT, along with just the general things that we do on an annual basis. So there was much discussion about how to prevent burnout and to assist in getting this done in a timely fashion.
So there's going to be more rewrites. I know I brought it up before. Was there any discussion about maybe getting a curriculum expert in to help with?
That's one of the things that was brought up, and
So
what that individual looked like, because there was much discussion at some of the tables as to whether it could be, what that person would look like on paper, let's say, okay, what that person would be tasked with, and if you're doing rewrites, across, let's say, 3 subject areas, 8 grades, that's 24 a year. Can one person really handle all that work? Would one person be able to walk in and make an impact to alleviate the pressure and impact on the teachers? So all of that is what was asked at the core team meeting. There weren't answers because we don't know if the curriculum council, took it to that level. So that's why we kind of sent it back to the curriculum council saying, can you redefine the function of this person, what they'd be tasked with, how much power they would have, and then bring that back to the core team for a final discussion and possible advancement to the board.
And I know in the past we had talked about when we were going over contracts and that we spend an awful lot of money on subs every year, so I did look that up for the last few years. And I figured probably the majority of the money spent on substitutes was probably to write the curriculum, is what I'm going to assume. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. But I hate to think that we're spending $190,000 on subs for people that are calling in sick. So when they are out for a day writing curriculum or doing this stuff, that, it would certainly maybe pay for itself if we hired a curriculum specialist.
Yeah.
So, it's the past 3 years, each year it's over 100,000, one year was 180, which was when we were doing all the standards based. So that's why I thought, to make sure that was on the radar as an option, because certainly these folks are being burned out.
I talked with Mark about that maybe a few months back, just a phone call to ask him what the dollar figures were. My understanding is that 3/4 of that dollar figure on an annual basis is sick and out.
In personal days.
In personal days, because the writing is actually taking place during the summer, if I'm not mistaken, the majority of it.
Well, they go to curriculum council once a month.
Correct, but not all teachers.
Not
So
all
you
what?
figure not all the teachers do.
Oh, no, but.
So I mean,
one
how
from
many
each grade level.
teachers are on the curriculum council?
We would have, I believe, 10, approximately 10
Okay, so that would equate to about 80
days a year.
80 days a
Yeah,
year,
10 meetings.
which my understanding was that number wouldn't hit the 100,000 plus in subs, from my understanding. That a majority of that dollar figure, you can look into it, but a majority of that was actually sick time, personal days, etc.
You
Including
make an
maternity.
assumption, that's very sad,
Right.
but, okay.
Nothing we can do about it.
Right.
That you have that time
It's in their
coming.
contracts, and they're entitled to it.
Thanks
So
for
in any
telling us what
event,
it is.
the detailed discussion is coming, but there's tremendous input that's been gathered from all teachers, from the council, from the core team. So we're getting the collective thinking of a lot of people on it.
And we have one of our core team members here tonight, Greg in the back. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Anything else from the board in terms of the strategic plan? Move on then to action item, we just have one, and that is to approve proposed tax rate settlements for 2005, 2006.
I'll recommend that the Board of Education approves the proposed tax rate settlement for 2005 and 2006 as presented.
We have a second, please?
Second.
Moved and seconded that the Board of Education approves proposed tax rate settlements for 2005, 2006 as presented.
Mr. Miraboli?
Yes.
Mrs. Nelson?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Halloran?
Yes.
Mr. Wrigley?
Yes.
Mrs. Tegmeyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Hauk?
Yes.
Mrs. Sedley?
Yes, ayes have it and the motion carries. Okay, items for the next agenda. The tax levy hearing, adopt the tax levy, approve the audit report, midterm superintendent review, review community relations, section 8 board policy, review fees, preliminary discussion of service provider contracts, review strategic plan recommendations. I don't have a sense on how long next month is going to be. Would that be a time to address the ITBS questions?
Well, it needs to be done anyway because I want to do it in the context of our contract. So we can just embed it within there.
Is that all right with the board that we do that next month right away? Sure.
The
Yeah.
WIC thing.
ITBS?
Yeah, and I've
There
got,
were 3 items regarding that.
I wrote down to find out what Riverside Publishing provides in terms of reporting,
That's one.
right? The services of Dr. John Wick, and
No,
what
I
he's-
included that in there.
Oh, that's, okay, so.
I included what information we get from Riverside versus John Weck.
Okay,
Okay, then I have the potential ITBS, discussion. I don't know if it's a discussion or if we're just gonna do it. The C to E conversion,
yeah, I have that written down, well,
okay?
yeah, I have that down as well, because I had that as well as asking Kathy Lawrence, but that's just a question about Karen's question, whether or not there's any way that Riverside
Can get a
Publishing
more
can do.
meaningful
can do a s-
comparison. That
Yeah,
was
I
my
have that,
third item.
yeah, I have that down
Right.
too.
So if we have answers to those would potentially
The
be,
discussion items,
Right.
yeah.
yeah, I would, we could go either way with it, but unless there's a hurry to do that, because we're going to be discussing that in the June testing report anyway. I mean, it's really the pleasure of the board, but it would probably have more meaning.
I'd like to see the data test.
Which would be possible in June, because
but I
we
think
give
what-
it in May.
But I think what I'm hearing is that to be able to have June of last year converted to a format that can be compared to what we received today. That's what I'm hearing.
And the
June.
demographics, I don't wanna wait till June.
and then there was the demographics, right?
Yeah.
Wait, so we're asking to do that, or we're asking to discuss that?
I
I
guess
would
we're
assume-
asking, I
I
guess
would
we're
assume-
asking if we can get that.
Is it, well, if we can get it, but not necessarily to do it?
Not necessarily discuss it. That's why I had both of these down as
Well,
questions.
I'm
to
assuming,
first
is there
need to find
expense
out.
involved in the conversion? Because I don't want to really just assume we're going to do it and incur an expense without discussing it.
Was there an expense in the last conversion? Should we?
I don't know, but that's done.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So if there was an expense the last time, there would be probably, who does the converting? WIC?
Well, I have to look and see whether we can just get the tables from
Yeah, maybe we'll do it
Riverside,
ourselves.
but I can't predict that right now. I'm not going to commit to something that I don't have the accurate information on.
No, you don't have to commit, but I mean, at least come with,
At least get answers to
get
these.
the answers, right, right.
Whether or not they wind up being a discussion item or they might just be an answer.
Right, and then.
So let me make sure I've got my marching orders correct here. So the issue is Form C to E conversions.
Right, there was a concern expressed that the 2011 Form E showed a drop in something. I'm sorry, the 2011 Fall Form E test to the 2012 May Form C test showed a drop in something that then turned around and showed an increase that it happened to occur over the summer in the 2012 Fall Form E test. And then you were saying, well, that's all because of conversions, this, that, and the other. So then the request came out that said, well, can you do a conversion so that we're looking at, not like
Okay.
data, but.
All right, that helps. The board is aware there's only 3 sub-tests that we give, so there will
Right.
only be, okay, right.
In the spring,
Yeah.
right.
And at a minimum in the future, as part of that was when we get that data, I guess in June, show the actual test scores to be able to compare them like you do for the fall test data, as opposed to a written report kind of. So that was one. Two was the Riverside data versus what we get from John Weck. And then 3 was to ask Kathy Lawrence if,
We can get comparisons against comparable districts.
right.
Yeah, for demographics,
Right.
yeah. as-
Well, I know the answer to that. They don't norm, they only have national norms.
Well, do we have a list of districts in this area that do it? I mean, she was throwing out Kenilworth.
I thought she was.
I know Butler does it, I think just for 7th and 8th
Yeah.
grade, but, I mean, when she listed those districts, I actually looked up each one and contacted them, and
Well, we have to ask her, because from a legal
I don't think
standpoint,
any of
maybe
them
she
do.
can't.
Well, the other thing is that they give it at different times, and there's, I mean, it's not a valid
well, I would think
comparison,
so.
because they could give it at different times, I mean, I give it to all their kids.
Well, I mean, they don't
But
even
then-
give it
but
at all,
then-
is
but
what I'm
then based on
saying. I
that
couldn't find
statement,
one
then-
district other than Butler,
I
and
mean-
I think Kenilworth.
And in all reality, you know, based on what you just said, then that would make everything we looked at up meaningless as well.
Why did you say that?
Well, because you said if you compare, if I take it in fall and you take it in May, and I can't compare the two of us because of that, then I certainly can't compare the two of us when we throw them into a national norm. I mean, because
The
it's the
only
same
accurate
data, it's the same
comparison-
data, it's the same data.
Well, it depends on what form they might, I don't know what form
Well,
they're taking.
and that's why
There's so
instead-
many variables.
I know, you're already offering up an answer, so we're suggesting just ask Kathy Lawrence.
Okay, so the question of Kathy Lawrence is, does Riverside provide norms other than national norms?
Correct.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I don't think that's
Well-
what we were looking for. I thought we were looking for, we
Well, I'm not-
recognize the fact that Riverside Publishing uses national norms for the ITBS. The question is, how do our scores compare to comparable districts?
Correct, correct. And I'm assuming that that's
Not
what he's meaning by,
necessarily
right, so it's not different
different
norms, it's the
norms.
same norm,
Right.
Yes.
just different
Right, right, right.
demographics.
Yes.
And or could you give us a list of schools in the state that take it, and we'll look them up, because they should all be online, right?
ITBS doesn't have to be, ISAC does.
No, but
not
usually you can go to their
ITBS.
district
No,
website,
under-
and look at their testing report. and
Understood,
find
but
out.
I'm just saying
You're right,
that,
they make it.
but I'm just
You're
saying
right.
it doesn't
They don't
have to
have
be
to be.
because it's an optional
I mean,
test.
And it's always
ISAT,
foilable, too.
yes, ISAT, yes,
Okay, so at this point, all we can do is post the question.
correct.
That's it.
Okay, so,
Not necessarily an item
next.
for the next agenda unless we know what the answer to the question is. All right, anything else that I've missed?
I do need a way that I can get board input on, we have, according to the board goals in January, another update for technology. And I put that request out and I haven't got much, I haven't got any feedback. So how should I get that? Should I pose the question again and people can just send that to me? Or does it have to be, or should it be an agenda item in December where people can tell me what they were interested in finding out about the next status report, scheduled for January?
Well, I would like that report that we discussed in our finance committee updated, and with.
You know, rather than try, it's not, we don't have that as an agenda item now.
But the question is, should we put
How-
it
how
on the
do I get
December
the
agenda
input?
and talk about what we want for January? Or should we just
Oh,
email mark our
okay.
interests? What does the board want to do?
I think it should be an agenda item.
All
There's
right.
a lot of
Me
money
too.
spent, and I think we need to
Okay.
discuss it.
Okay, then we'll put that on. And then Karen, that'll be an opportunity then for you to share with us what you would like Mark to bring back in January.
Yes, thank you.
Anything else? Open forum. Anyone this evening?
Well, I have one issue that was brought to my attention, which I'm sure has nothing to do with...
Excuse me, before you begin, may I ask that you please identify yourself?
Oh, I'm John Borelli.
Thank you.
I have kindergartners.
Thank you.
There was an incident on a school bus with somebody stabbing someone with a pencil or poking holes in a seat. I don't know all the details, but an email went out to hundreds of parents asking if anybody knew about this or what was the situation, what bus do your kids ride. My kids don't ride a bus, so I wanted to isolate myself from it. And in the same thing, as a former educator, I also want to be involved in my kids' education. And I don't know, do you even know about this incident? Was this brought to your attention? You know, has it been discussed? I'm sure it's privacy laws. That's what I work in now. I know all about that. But I know some of the parents were here today for that reason. Maybe they don't want to say anything. I don't know. But I figured rather than let it go without being addressed, at least if there's, you know, something that somebody knows or whatever. I mean, that's it.
You know, the only thing that the board is at liberty to discuss is what is on its agenda, and we have concluded, you know, the portion that we can conduct in open session. And if you notice that we do have a closed session this evening, and there are 2 items in which that the board is going to be going into closed session and discussing. While I am not at liberty to tell you the specifics of what either one of those are, we do have an opportunity this evening as a board to discuss matters in closed session. And that is really the only information I can provide you at this time. So I
That's
appreciate
fair.
you bringing it up to our attention. Thank you. Anything else this evening?
I have
Yes.
one. My concerns the safety over at the Pleasantdale at the elementary school. My name is Kristen Violante. I know Mr. Vanderkart. I haven't really talked to him in depth, but I've talked a lot to his staff. But I think it goes a little bit above Mr. Vanderkart. It is extremely unsafe at the elementary school, going in and coming out. That street is very narrow. You got landscaping trucks, you got delivery trucks, you got the mail truck, and then so to get out onto German Church Road, it's ridiculous. The second thing is there are a lot of parents that I wish were a little bit more knowledgeable on the rules of the road, and that when a stop sign is out of a bus that you need to stop. And I don't know if I can do it, but I'm this close to going off on some parents because one of the kids, especially one of those special ed kids, one of the kids that are in special ed, getting off the bus is going to go run in front of one of those buses and they're going to get hit. It is dangerous. And I know most of you do not have kids at the elementary school. Please, go there one day and just watch. And I got to give it to Mr. Vanderkart. His staff are trying to do a wonderful job, but I'm putting you on notice on here and in the minutes that if someone gets hurt, there's going to be a huge lawsuit. And I'm not saying it's going to be for me, but there's going to be a huge lawsuit because it is very, very dangerous. My other concern is how the hell an emergency vehicle is going to get in and out of there in case of an emergency is beyond me. Not just for kids, but for staff too. So when you talk about improvements, capital improvements, I think you seriously need to consider doing something about that school before someone gets hurt.
Kristen, can I just get clarification? Are you referring to School Street or are you referring to the parking lot? I'm
Both. School Street, School Street, to get from
I just
German
wanted-
Church,
I just
to
wanted
get from the parking lot of the school to German Church. There's landscaping buses. Sometimes the buses have to wait behind a landscaping bus. There's a huge line just to get around. How an emergency vehicle is going to get around, I have no idea. And I just think that this isn't something that needs to be taken lightly because someone is going to get hurt. It's just a matter of time. And Gina's the only one that...
A few weeks ago, it was the worst I've ever seen it.
Okay, I just wanted clarity
Yeah.
because when you were saying it, you know, it's general. I wanted to make sure that we were clear that we were speaking about School Street.
think we
So
should-
that's.
I just, you know, as a parent, I'd be willing to set up some parents that have orange jackets on. I mean, there's people talking on the phone. There's people beeping at me because I'm stopped like I'm supposed to be. It's very disrespectful. Mr. Emzo and Mr. McAtee are trying their best, as well as Mr. Vanderkart, but there needs to be police, or something needs to be done, because if someone gets hurt, it's gonna be a huge lawsuit, and it's gonna be us as taxpayers, they're gonna pay for it. So as long as you have this $12 million, you know, surplus, I think that something needs to be looked into that with the village or whatever to do something about it before a child gets hurt. Or before an emergency vehicle can't get to a teacher or an administrator or a student because something as serious is happening at the school.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe we
Appreciate
put
it.
it on an agenda or something in the future.
I have a questions too,
Oh,
so
please, would you make sure Erica gets that? Absolutely.
it's in regards to that.
Okay, anything else this evening during open forum? With that, may I have a motion, please, that may I have a motion?
All right, I'll move that the Board of Education move into closed session at 8:53 PM to discuss appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, dismissal of personnel, and matters relating to individual students.
Second.
Mr. Wrigley?
Yes.
Mrs. Tegmeyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Hull?
Yes.
Mr. Mobley?
Yes.
Mrs. Nelson?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Halloran?
Yes.
Mrs. Sedley?
Yes. The board will move into closed session after it just takes a short recess. Thank you.